In a world where appearances often dictate acceptance and love, two souls stood at the crossroads of fate. Domitila had always felt like a ghost, drifting through life with a unique skin condition that drew stares and whispers. Beneath the surface, however, burned a heart filled with dreams, passion, and a voice that could stir the soul. Enter Janvi, a man with an unwavering belief in love's transformative power. With a smile that invited warmth and a heart that radiated empathy, he possessed a rare gift, the ability to see beyond the superficial. When their paths crossed in a cozy cafe just blocks from the church, an undeniable spark ignited, a magnetic force that defied societal norms. Dara and Jay walked to a small cafe just 2 blocks from the church. Each step felt monumental for Dara, who rarely ventured out socially. She sensed the stares of passers-by and heard the whispers swirling around her. But beside her, Jay walked tall and confident, completely at ease in her company. Upon entering the cafe, the server did a double take at Dara before taking their order with forced politeness. Jay quickly picked up on the change in Dara's posture, noticing how she seemed to fold in on herself, retreating inward under the weight of scrutiny. "You sing like someone who fears nothing," he observed once they were alone. "But right now, you look afraid." Dara's hands tightened around her mug. "Singing is different. When I sing, I'm connecting with something greater than myself. Out here," she gestured vaguely at the world beyond their table. "Out here, I'm just a woman with a condition that makes people uncomfortable." "Not me," Jay said quietly. "You don't make me uncomfortable." "Why not?" The question burst out of her with unexpected force. "Don't pretend you don't see it. Everyone does." "I see it," he acknowledged. "But I see you more." The woman whose voice carries such conviction that it made me, a skeptic, believe in something greater. The woman with eyes that hold more depth than anyone I've ever met. Tears threatened at the corners of Dara's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her this way, like she was worthy of such careful observation and genuine interest. "I don't know what to do with your kindness," she admitted. Jay reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "An invitation, not a demand. For now, just accept it. The rest we'll figure out together." After a moment's hesitation, Dara placed her hand in his. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched someone outside her family in years, and the simple contact felt revolutionary. As weeks passed, Jay and Dara's relationship deepened. They met after church, shared meals, and spent hours discussing everything from theology to childhood dreams. For Dara, who had spent a lifetime in isolation, these conversations were like water in the desert. Doubt, however, still plagued her. One evening, after Jay had walked her home, she knelt in prayer, tears streaming down her face. "Lord," she whispered, "if this man's heart is pure, show me a sign. And if his intentions are false, give me the strength to walk away before I'm broken beyond repair." The answer arrived unexpectedly. The next day, her church group planned an outreach at a local children's hospital. Dara had avoided such events in the past, fearing her appearance would frighten the children. Yet, something compelled her to attend this time. Arriving at the hospital, she found Jay already there, though they hadn't arranged to meet. He regularly volunteered, reading stories to children with serious illnesses. She watched from the doorway as he sat surrounded by children, his animated voice breathing life into a story. One little girl with burn scars covering half her face sat slightly apart from the others. As the children dispersed, Jay approached her quietly. Dara couldn't hear their exchange, but she saw the girl's hesitant smile bloom into laughter. When Jay left her side, the child seemed taller somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. "You didn't tell me you volunteered here," Dara said when he finally noticed her. Jay shrugged, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features. "It never came up. I've been coming here since before I met you." "What did you say to that girl with the burns?" Dara asked, gesturing to the child. "That her scars tell a story of survival, not something to be ashamed of," he replied. His eyes met Dara's with intensity. "What makes us different can also make us extraordinary." In that moment, Dara knew. This was the sign she had prayed for. Jay's compassion wasn't just for show. It was ingrained in him, part of who he was at his core. That night, she carefully selected a photograph of herself, a rare picture taken when she felt beautiful despite her condition. On the back, she wrote 3 simple words, "I love you." The next time they met, She slipped it into his hand without explanation. When he read it, his eyes filled with a joy so pure it stole her breath away. "I've been waiting to hear that," he said. "I love you too, Dara. Every part of you." For the first time in her life, Dara believed it completely. As autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, Jay and Dara strolled through the park that had become their favorite retreat. 6 months had passed since their first coffee, and their love had blossomed into something neither had believed possible. "I want to marry you," Jay declared suddenly, stopping beside a small pond where ducks gathered. It wasn't a question, but a statement, as though he were affirming a fundamental truth about the universe. Dara's heart soared before reality crashed down. "You don't know what you're asking," she said softly. "Marriage means family, possibly children. It ties you forever to someone everyone stares at and whispers about." "I know exactly what I'm asking," Jay countered, taking both her hands in his. "I'm asking to spend my life with the woman I love. Everything else is just noise." Still, she hesitated. "Your family will love you because I love you," he finished confidently. "They're good people. Once they know you, they'll see what I see." His certainty was infectious, and Dara found herself nodding, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." They embraced in the warm autumn sunlight, unaware that their greatest challenge loomed just ahead. The following weekend, Jay arranged a dinner at his parents' home. He had spoken of Dara for months, but this would be their first meeting. His enthusiasm blinded him to the potential for disaster. "They're going to adore you," he assured Dara as they approached the modest family home. She nodded, but anxiety twisted her stomach into knots. Mrs. May opened the door, her welcoming smile freezing the instant she saw Dara. Behind her, Mr. Cole appeared, his shock less concealed. "Come in," Mrs. May managed, stepping aside to let them enter. The atmosphere in the house felt stifling, polite words stretched thin over obvious discomfort. Throughout dinner, Jay's parents barely glanced at Dara, directing most questions to their son. When they finally addressed her, their tone carried an undercurrent of pity that felt more stifling than outright rejection. As they prepared to leave, Jay pulled his parents aside to share the news of their engagement. The argument that erupted was all the more painful for being conducted in hushed, urgent tones. "This is madness," his father hissed. "You cannot bind yourself to such a burden." "She's not a burden. She's the woman I love," Jay replied, his voice rising despite his efforts to maintain composure. "Think of children, Jay. Think of the life you'll lead," his mother implored, gripping his arm. "I have thought of it," he insisted. "A happy one, with the woman God placed in my path." His father's face hardened. "If you go through with this, don't expect us at the wedding. We won't witness you throw your life away." Dara, overhearing every crushing word, quietly slipped out the front door. When Jay found her minutes later, she was walking down the street, her arms wrapped tightly around herself against the evening chill. "Dara, wait," he called, catching up to her. "Don't listen to them. They don't understand yet." "They understand perfectly," she replied, her voice hollow. "They see what everyone else sees except you." Jay took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then everyone is blind. I choose you, Dara. If the whole world stands against us, I still choose you." In that quiet street, with stars emerging overhead and the weight of rejection heavy on her heart, Dara made her decision. She wouldn't allow fear to steal this chance at happiness. She would be brave enough to accept the love he offered so freely. "And I choose you," she whispered back, "no matter what comes next." The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions. Jay made repeated attempts to reconcile with his parents, visiting their home, calling daily, and even writing letters explaining the depth of his feelings for Dara. Each effort was met with the same response: "Change your mind, or face your future alone." Word spread through their community. Jay's childhood friends, initially supportive, began to distance themselves. Some questioned his sanity, others his motives. The prevailing theory was that he was marrying Dara out of pity or misguided charity. "Let them talk," Jay reassured each time Dara's resolve wavered. "What we have is between us and God. No one else needs to understand it." However, as the wedding approached and the list of declining invitations grew, the reality set in. Their ceremony would be nearly empty without Jay's parents, prominent members of the community, attending. 3 days before the wedding, Jay arrived at Dara's apartment with a stranger, an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face. "This is Mr. Leo," Jay introduced him. "You'll meet his wife tomorrow. They've agreed to stand in as my parents at the ceremony." Dara stared in disbelief. "You're hiring people to pretend to be your family?" "I'm ensuring our day isn't overshadowed by absence," Jay corrected gently. "Mr. Leo is a widower from my building. His wife will be played by his sister. They believe in what we're doing." Mr. Leo stepped forward, taking Dara's hand in both of his. "I've watched this man fight for your love. When he told me your story, I knew I had to help. My late wife had vitiligo, not the same as your condition, but enough to know what it feels like to be stared at. Love that persists despite the world's judgment is the rarest kind." Tears welled in Dara's eyes. This stranger's acceptance felt like a benediction. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. The small church was sparsely populated, comprised of choir members who had become Dara's friends, a few loyal colleagues of Jay's, and the Leos playing their roles with convincing warmth. Dara wore a simple white dress, her face uncovered. For the first time in her life, she made no attempt to hide her skin. As she walked down the aisle toward Jay, whose face shone with adoration, she felt beautiful. Their vows were traditional but delivered with such genuine emotion that several guests wiped away tears. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Jay kissed her without reservation, a public declaration that he celebrated every part of her. The reception was modest, a small gathering in the church hall with homemade food and recorded music. Yet, what it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in sincerity from the few who had come to celebrate wholeheartedly. Late in the evening, as they prepared to leave, Mr. Leo pulled Jay aside. "Your real father doesn't know what he's missing," the older man said firmly. "I would be proud to call you son." For Jay, who had sacrificed his family's approval for love, those words were a balm to his wounded heart. He embraced Mr. Leo fiercely before taking his new wife's hand and stepping into their future together. Marriage brought immense joy, but also unexpected challenges. Jay and Dara moved into the small house his parents had left vacant when they relocated to Uganda, a temporary arrangement until they could afford their own place. The first months constituted a blissful bubble, their love creating a sanctuary against the outside world. However, reality soon intruded in the form of financial pressure. Jay, once successful in his father's business, found doors closing in his face everywhere. "It's strange," he told Dara one evening after another unsuccessful job interview. "They're all so polite about it. But the message is clear. No one wants to hire me." Dara set aside the mending she had been working on. "Is it because of me?" Jay hesitated before nodding slowly. "Former colleagues who were once my friends now act like I've committed some terrible transgression. One actually asked if I was mentally stable." She crossed the room to kneel beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "I never wanted to be a burden to you. Maybe we should." "Don't," he interrupted firmly. "Don't even suggest it. We're not doing anything differently. I'll find work somewhere. There has to be someone who will judge me based on my abilities and not my personal choices." As weeks stretched into months, that optimism began to fade. Jay took odd jobs, manual labor, night security work, anything to keep food on the table. The strain soon showed in the new lines around his eyes, the weariness in his shoulders. Dara tried finding work as well, but her reception was even worse. Potential employers couldn't see past her appearance, regardless of her qualifications. After one particularly humiliating interview where the manager could barely look at her, she stopped trying. Their financial situation grew increasingly precarious. Then came the letter that shattered any security they had left. "They're selling the house," Jay said numbly, the document trembling in his hand. "My parents want their investment liquidated. We have 30 days to vacate." Dara felt the ground fall away beneath her. "Where will we go?" Neither had an answer. Their savings had been depleted, and their income barely covered essentials. Renting an apartment would require deposits that they could not afford. That night, they held each other close, the specter of homelessness hovering over them. "I'm sorry," Jay whispered into the darkness. "I promised to take care of you, and now." "Don't apologize," Dara cut him off. "You have given me more than anyone ever has. Acceptance, love, dignity. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The next day, Jay swallowed his pride and approached Mr. Leo, explaining their dire situation. The older man immediately offered his spare room, but it was a temporary solution at best. As they packed their few belongings, Dara found herself returning to prayer with renewed urgency. "Lord," she pleaded, "we've chosen love as you command. Show us the path forward." The answer didn't arrive immediately or miraculously. There were no sudden windfalls or unexpected opportunities. Instead, they moved into Mr. Leo's cramped spare room, continuing their daily struggle while their love was tested by circumstances neither had anticipated. Yet, amidst this hardship, something remarkable unfolded. Their bond didn't fracture, it strengthened. Each sacrifice, each indignity weathered together, forged their connection into something unbreakable. "I would choose this 1,000 times over," Jay told Dara one night as they lay in their borrowed bed. "Poverty with you is richer than wealth without you." She traced the lines of strain on his beloved face. "And I would choose you in every lifetime, through any hardship." In a world that had rejected their union, they had become each other's sanctuary. It wasn't the life either had envisioned, but the love they shared infused it with beauty in its own way. After 3 months in Mr. Leo's spare room, Jay finally secured steady work as a night watchman at a warehouse. The pay was minimal, but it allowed them to rent a single room in one of the city's poorer neighborhoods, a tiny space with shared bathroom facilities and unreliable electricity.